Okay, let's start with the second slide. Yeah, this is all about me. I am a GD for Kotlin. I currently am working with GeoCinema as a mobile architect, working most on Kotlin and KMP SDKs, as well as performance optimizations, Jetpack Compose, and all of those things, right? Previously, I worked with Byju, Paytm, Gojek, and Meesho. I wrote few books. I used to run GDG. I currently don't run GDG Kolkata. I used to run that. I am a GD for Kotlin. I give talks and all. I recently created a YouTube channel. I am not sure I can call myself a YouTuber or not. And this is again gone. So yeah. So yeah, that's all about me. Now, today I'm going to talk about Kotlin Multiplatform, or rather creating SDKs with Kotlin Multiplatform. So this is something I have been doing recently, right? So before we move forward, we have to address the elephant in the room. What is an SDK? So, yeah, any answers here? A lot of people raised hand, they work with SDKs, they know what an SDK is. Any answers here? Yeah, that is the full form. I didn't ask for full form. Everyone knows SDK stands for Software Development Kit. What is that? What is a Software Development Kit? Any answers? Not in the context what we are talking about today. We are not creating a platform to build mobile applications, right? So SDK or library is a block of code that you share across apps to reduce redundancy, right? So you have implemented some features, you have implemented something, and you have multiple apps to share it across. You create an SDK for that, right? And similarly, like probably you have built something that you want to sell it to other companies which are building user-side app. So you are a B2B company, right? And or dev tooling company. In that way, you sell your SDK to your clients. So you build an SDK and sell it to your clients. What your SDK does? Your SDK probably does analytics or ads or image processing, something like that, or chat, right? And you implemented that thing, so your client doesn't have to do that. Similarly, if you have multiple apps across your company, you also do that. In some companies, in some super app companies, they build every section of their app as a SDK, and then they plug everything together to make the complete app, right? So yeah. Now, while developing SDK, you have to follow certain rules, right? In order to make that SDK usable. So first rule of SDK is it should be plug and play, right? Or zeroth rule. It should be plug and play. Should be easy to remove. It kind of is a sub part of that first rule, but yeah, it still can be considered a separate rule. If your client apps, so whenever you build SDK, whether internal or external, you should always consider your the app where you are going to use that SDK as a client. So if the client wants to remove your SDK, that should be just like removing a dependency and removing the SDK calls. That's it. That should not need any more tasks. Right? Adding SDK and removing SDK should not be more than should not be 10 sprints, right? If your client or the app wants to use your SDK, they should not have to add 10 more dependencies just to use your SDK. And yeah, interaction should be straightforward and simple. Pretty self-explanatory. Data type should be interoperable. Let's say you are building an SDK using, say, C#, right? And you are creating a data type that is not accessible in your client where you are using, say, JS, JavaScript. those data types are not interoperable. So your client has to implement some data type, or you have to pass some other implementation of the data type, and then your client uses it. That is not a very good approach to develop an SDK. So yeah, data type should be interoperable. And I personally prefer SDKs with no UI implementation, but in some cases those are unavoidable. For example, if you are building a video processing SDK, UI implementation will be there, right? You cannot avoid it. Same goes for, say, you are building an ads SDK, right? You are building a competitor of Google Ads. So UI implementation will be there. You cannot avoid it. Now, how to build an SDK? We are finally at the core part. Yeah, these are the process to build an SDK. Okay, done? We can go now? No, I haven't yet talked about KMP. So, yeah, these are the process you follow to build any SDK. This is pretty similar to process of building an app as well, right? And if you are a company which sells SDK, and you want to sell SDK, you want to support as much platforms as you want, right? Not only one platform, Android. You want to support iOS, you want to support web, tvOS, TVs, and more and more. So yeah, your effort keeps getting from 1x to 2x, 3x, 5x, 7x, more and more and more. Yeah, finally you get to a situation like this. Who all agrees? Okay, no one agrees. Cool. So here's the thing, right? We are building an SDK to share code. That is the main purpose of building an SDK, right? Sharing code. So when we are doing so much to share code, why not share code across platforms as well? That makes sense, right? Main objective of SDK is sharing code. And while developing SDK, why not share code there as well? So that would even further the goal of the SDK, right? So let's try to do that. What are the current solutions? Yeah, it's not a solution. To use SDK created with Flutter in any native app, you have to fire up a Flutter engine. So the only way you can consume a SDK created by Flutter with Flutter is a Flutter app, right? Same goes for React Native and every other cross-platform solution. Yeah, this is what I am advocating for. To be very honest, this is not the only way. You can achieve the same thing by using C or C++. You can, and that has been done for many years. So you can write some code in C and share it across platforms by using native interfaces. Android supports that, iOS supports that. Web not so much, but you can still do that. So yeah, you can do that with C, C++, but who likes writing code in C, C++? Please raise your hand. Okay, unless everyone is asleep, I am going to assume no one likes. So who likes writing code in Kotlin? Yeah, I am thankful no one is asleep. So yeah, writing code in Kotlin is easier than writing code in C, C++. Kotlin is a high-level language. So unless you have something very memory extensive that you want to control the lower level bit of it, then going through Kotlin makes more sense. Now, why? I am saying Kotlin is best suited or KMP is best suited, but why? So first of all, Kotlin language. Who all thinks Kotlin is created by Google? Yeah, now no one will raise the hand, right? Because I have it written in the slides. It's created by JetBrains. So yeah, Kotlin is not created by Google. Kotlin is created by a company called JetBrains, which creates multiple dev tooling and IDEs, namely IntelliJ, WebStorm, PHPStorm, and there are more. So they created Kotlin as a language to develop their IDEs. Yeah, Kotlin was never meant for or never targeted for Android development. It's just that Google supported it. So same year when Google supported it in July 2017, in January 2017, Spring or VMware announced their support for Kotlin. So Kotlin you can use for server-side development as well with Spring or their own framework called KTOR. I just talked about it, right? And Kotlin, as I told, Kotlin JVM, Kotlin JS, and Kotlin Native have been here for a while. It's just that the first time we are using them together, right? So, just like I told, what JetBrains did is they took Kotlin and all the platforms Kotlin was targeting and matched them together, created Kotlin Multiplatform. You can see that logo behind my t-shirt. Yeah. Now, this is what Kotlin Multiplatform teaches. And these are some reasons. You can read it later on. I will share the slides. Now, let's get into understanding Kotlin Multiplatform. So, there is some common code that you share across all platforms. First of all, Kotlin Multiplatform is not a cross-platform solution. It's the one and only multi-platform solution. Although some other framework later on stole the name and used it with their buttery name, but they are not multi-platform, they are cross-platform. Kotlin is fully multi-platform. Why? I will come to that. Now, as I said, there are some common code you want to share across all the platforms. And with Kotlin Multiplatform, you can control how much code you want to share. So all the code that you want to share, you put it in the common. Then for each platform you are targeting, you add that platform specific code, right? That you can write on Kotlin or that you can write in a platform native language. That's completely your choice. Now, these are all the platforms that KMP supports. So Android and server-side development is done through JVM. JS is there, Kotlin JS. You can use it with any JS framework, be it Node, Next.js. Someone was very fan of Next.js here. So yeah, you can use KMP with Next.js or any JS framework or whatever you have, right? In native, it supports Linux, Me, which is indirectly Windows, and Apple devices. On Apple devices, it supports everything. All are listed here, right? Now, how? I said you can write some code on common and then implement platform-specific code, and you can interact with them, right? But how? Let's say you have something on platform-specific code, right? Let's say get UUID. UUID is often implemented natively, right? In Apple, you have NSUUID. Can someone tell me how to get an UUID in JavaScript? I forgot. Anyone can tell me? No, UUID. Okay. How to get an UUID in Android? Anyone can tell me? iOS, I said. I'm not an iOS developer. I said NSUUID is there. How to get UUID in Android? Okay. No one knows. Cool. Let's talk about, networking, right? In iOS, you have Darwin. In Android, you have OKHTTP. And in JavaScript, you have JavaScript libraries for networking, right? And let's say you want to use OKHTTP in Android, Darwin in iOS. because of obvious performance benefits. Now, you are calling the network from common code. How to achieve that? So for that, we have expect actual. Expect actual are more like interface and implementation. But when you write an interface, there is no guarantee you will write the implementation, right? There's no guarantee for that. No IDE or no framework forces you to implement your interfaces. So how that's why expect actual is there, which if you write an expected function in your common code, your IDE will make sure you implement them across all the platforms you are targeting. So let's say I have a do something function here as expected. In actual, I will implement it on Android, JVM, native, and JS. And this is how the directory structure is. So you can see shared, right? So shared is a module. In IntelliJ or VS Code, you know what a module is, right? A code module is where you put a bundle of interrelated code together. And when you create an SDK in VS Code or IntelliJ, you create a module. That module you export as an SDK, right? For KMP, you anyway have to follow the same structure. Now, inside the shared module, there is Android main, there is common main, there is iOS main, JS main, you can add tvOS main, or whatever other platforms you want to support, right? And when you build it, all comes together. UUID. So I was talking about UUID. No one knows how to create UUID in Android or JS. So let me teach you that. Here's an expected function, get random UUID. And here's the Android implementation. So in Android, you use JVM or Java UUID. So UUID.get.random UUID is the method. Here's the implementation for iOS. I already told you that NSUUID. And here's the JavaScript implementation. So there's an NPM package called UUID version 9 I'm using. But there's a NPM package. I have added that NPM dependency, and then I am calling that particular function. And talking about dependencies, this is how you add dependencies. And here, I have the NPM dependency in JS main. So, as I said, in version 9 I am using. And in Android main, I am using, as you can see, I am using OKHTTP. iOS main, I am using Darwin. And this is the shared common code, right? So the code you want to share, you can write it in common main, and you can write your implementation there. And then the code you want to have platform specific, you can either use expect actual, or you can just go ahead and write your platform specific code in directly iOS main, JS main, or Android main, right? And this is how you export the SDKs. As I was saying, so in Kotlin, I told it is native. Why native? When you export it in Android, you export AAR, right? The Android native SDK file format. In iOS, you export either .framework or .xc framework, or you export via SPM or Cocoa Pods, whatever you choose. You have multiple options in iOS. I wrote XC framework here because that's more closer to AR. But yeah, in JS, you have two options. You can either share a minified JS file, or you can upload it to NPM package. How to distribute it through NPM, I will talk about that. And this is how you create a XC framework build. I supported iOS here. You can add tvOS support as well. So for tvOS, it will go tvOS x64, tvOS simulator ARM64. And if you want to support SPM, then this is how you support. Similarly with TouchLab, you can TouchLab KMP bridge that lets you support, like distribute your iOS distribution easily. So they support SPM, they support Cocoa Pods, and yeah. Now, this is something very interesting. So if you create an enum in Kotlin code in KMP, then that enum doesn't become exhaustive in iOS. Similarly, if you create a data class with default values, or any function you have with default values, then those default values doesn't becomes necessary or required arguments in iOS. So they don't become optional ones. How to solve that? We all know Swift supports this, right? But how to achieve those? So TouchLab created a plugin called Sky. So Sky is a library by TouchLab, or an annotation library by TouchLab, where you can use default arguments .enabled, and it default arguments becomes interoperable across Android and iOS. Similarly, there is enum interrupt.enabled, so it becomes interoperable. When you use Kotlin enums in Swift, they become exhaustive. You can put a switch clause and becomes exhaustive, right? Now, at the bottom, there is JS export. So what is JS export? So similarly, how I told about there is interoperable issues with Kotlin and Swift, enums also have interoperability issues in JavaScript. So how to solve for that? So you can create an object and put properties there with each property for different enum value, and then you can use that user type JS dot user as the enum value. So yeah, and I talked about release as well, right? When I talked about steps of building an SDK. So if you build an SDK differently for each platform, it's very tough to maintain a single versioning, right? Let's say you in Android you released SDK version 1.0.0, in iOS it is 1.0.1. That's very hard to manage and maintain, right? Why? Because then you don't exactly know what are the difference between the fixes and the features in Android and iOS. When you're building the SDK together for all the platforms, that problem goes away. So here, how I manage releases for all the platforms. I have a single version. Since I'm building together, all the platforms are using the same version. And here's something more interesting. So if you use a KMP SDK in JS, in JavaScript, the size of the SDK is very important, right? It's not so important in Android or in Kotlin, because the size of SDK doesn't really matter. What matters is the compiled APK size or compiled iOS app size, right? However, in JavaScript, the total size of the source code is the size of your app. So a size of an SDK matters a lot. And people complain, JavaScript people complain that, hey, I want to use Kotlin Multiplatform, but the bundle size after sharing some code across is coming to 1 GB. How to solve for it? I can't use a 1 GB SDK in my code base, right? Even if I do lazy load, that lazy load will take hours. So how to solve for it? Solution is dead code elimination. So Kotlin supports dead code elimination, and you have to enable it like this. and you have to put the name of the classes you want to keep here. Those that are marked as unused by the ID, you have to put those names here that you want to keep, and then Kotlin automatically removes all the unnecessary functions in Kotlin standard library or any other third-party library you are using, and then reduces the size drastically. And yeah, this is how you get the JS bundle. So if you use npm distribution, this is how you will get it. And this is the XC framework files. In debug, you can see .exe framework file and in release. So 2 versions are created for debug and release. And yeah, that's it. And these are some IDEs and tools that becomes that helps you develop Kotlin multi-platform libraries and apps easier. One of them is IntelliJ IDEA that everyone knows about. Then there is Amper. Amper is a new tooling system for primarily targeting Kotlin multi-platform, but they will add multiple other frameworks and platforms soon. And then there is JetBrains Fleet, which is a new IDE, and Fleet has better support for Kotlin multi-platform than IntelliJ. Fleet is currently free right now, so I do recommend you all to try it out. And yeah, that's it. Any questions so far?
Hi, Rivu. Hello. So you were talking about building SDK, especially those like you prefer building headless SDK. Is it? Why so?
Yeah. So it depends, right? In some use cases, building headless SDKs make more sense, but in some cases you can't. So,
like
yeah.
example, I'm building a SDK that converts an image to PDF, something like that, right? So it needs to have a UI, right? If I were to build an SDK.
Yeah, as I said, I prefer SDK not having UI,
Okay.
but in some cases it's unavoidable, right?
But it's possible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Why not have transitive dependency? Because in the point 3 you said you should not add extra dependencies, right?
Yeah.
If there comes a case, why not have a transitive dependency?
If you to use your SDK, if you have to add more dependencies on client side, right, then that becomes a challenge, right? So let's say you are an Android developer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say you want to add retrofit as a dependency, right? And in order to add retrofit, if they mandate you that you have to use OKHTTP as a separate dependency,
right,
not as a part of retrofit.
Okay.
How will you that feel? Won't you feel that is complicated process? So that makes a app developer's life very hard.
Okay.
Right, and it's very tough to remove. When you want to, let's say you want to remove retrofit, replace it with something else. You just remove retrofit dependency and put something else.
Right.
But if you have to remove 5 dependencies to remove retrofit, then it becomes very hard to maintain.
Okay, right. Yeah, that's all. Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions?
You talk about Flutter SDK, right? So Flutter with a...
Flutter is a very good tool as a cross-platform solution. It has its own benefits. I'm not saying it's a bad platform or anything. It's a very good platform. But you can never make an SDK with Flutter. Why? Because if you make an SDK with Flutter, you have to use it within Flutter. And if you want to use it with a native app, Android, iOS, JS, whatever platform it is, right? You have to fire up a Flutter engine, which is a very expensive process. It's not something straight away. It is a very expensive process, both on processing and on memory. So you don't really want to do that, right?
Okay. In Kotlin, multi-platform is very new, right? So
yeah. So in Kotlin, in Java, Kotlin compiles to Java bytecode. In LLVM, Kotlin compiles to LLVM bytecode. The same thing Objective-C compiles to. And in JS, Kotlin transpiles to JS. So yeah, you ultimately at the end of the day you get a native development. So whether you use Kotlin or you use Objective C, you get the same bytecode wise. You get the same thing.
Okay. So if we use KML, the two benefits is one is performance, another one is the size.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
How stable do you think KMP is to start building SDKs in KMP? How do you feel?
So there are few challenges when you are targeting web or JS, right? One of the things I talked about here, the size and how to address it. Another thing is data class. When you have data class and date code elimination you want to achieve, and then there is obfuscation. So for those you have to use export and expect and actual and JS export very extensively. But other than that, I think it is pretty good. Most we have KMP code on production. There are a few issues we faced, but debugging those were very easy, right? So yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, I will be here across today and tomorrow as well. For some time I will come. So if you want to discuss anything more related to KMP or Jetpack Compose or Android development in general or mobile development in general, please do catch up. Thank you.